gun shooting, Columbia, Maryland, down the road from here. Should we expect to hear the President say something about gun control, be it states versus some kind of federal effort for gun control?
I ask unanimous consent that the quorum call be vitiated.
Without objection.
And I ask unanimous consent to speak as if in morning business.
Without objection.
Thank you, Mr. President. I rise this afternoon to talk about the President's sixth State of the Union address tomorrow night. Although I don't think the framers imagined the pageantry that has come to accompany the State of the Union, it certainly is enshrined in the Constitution. According to Article 2, Section 3, the President shall from time to time give the Congress information on the State of the Union and recommend to their consideration such measures as he shall judge necessary and expedient. Recommend for Congress's consideration such measures. I note with interest, Mr. President, in today's Wall Street Journal on the front page that President Obama intends to assert a unilateral agenda at the State of the Union, according to press reports, at least in the Wall Street Journal. The article begins, President Barack Obama Tuesday night will seek to shift the public's souring view of his leadership. And it goes on to say in paragraph 2, Mr. Obama will emphasize his intention to use unilateral presidential authority, bypassing Congress when necessary, to an extent not seen in his previous State of the Union speeches. This certainly doesn't sound like Article 2, Section 3, where the State of the Union is anticipated by our founders as an opportunity for the President to make recommendations to the Congress. But we shall see. Mr. President, it should not be difficult for President Obama to outline a number of national priorities that are necessary and expedient for the Congress to consider. As we enter the sixth year of the Obama administration, the economy continues to suffer from anemic growth and chronically high unemployment. Family poverty statistics are at record high levels. Small businesses, the ones who create our nation's jobs for the most part, are struggling to pay for government mandates and keep Americans at work at the same time. Of course, a major concern for Americans is the President's health care law, legislation that was rammed through Congress without bipartisan support. Individuals, families, businesses, and investors can plainly see that the law is plagued with problems. Hardly a day goes by without hearing from our citizens back home who are frustrated and worried about how the law impacts them. Instead of more affordable and more accessible health care, families in my state and across the country are dealing with the backlash of canceled insurance policies, higher premiums, and fewer choices. No one can really dispute these facts. At this point, Americans are rightful to be doubtful of more promises. They want to see results. They want to see real health care reform. They want to see job-creating strategies that will work, that have been proven to work. Americans need more tomorrow night than phraseology from the President. Without leadership and accountability, the public is right to lack confidence that the President's big government approach can move us forward, or that the President wants to work with Congress toward bipartisan solutions. I hope we can work together, Mr. President, for bipartisan solutions. One recent poll suggests, and this is stunning, that a majority of Americans actually question the Obama administration's competence in running the government. The same survey showed that most Americans believe the economy is either staying the same or getting worse. And I believe the American public sees things correctly, Mr. President. Until Americans see significant improvements in their lives, attempts by the White House to spin a positive economic message will ring hollow. Many Americans have been forced to take part-time work or have left the labor force altogether. They've left the labor force altogether. In the December jobs report, an official report of the government, we saw that the labor force participation rate, which reflects the number of adult Americans who have a job or are looking for one, has fallen to its lowest level since 1978. Let me repeat that, Mr. President. After 5 years of the Obama administration's leadership, the labor force participation rate is the worst it has been since 1978. Recent estimates indicate that median household income is almost $2,400 less than it was 4 years ago in inflation-adjusted dollars. President Obama has tried to shift the blame for the harm caused by his health care law, but that attempt to duck responsibility will not wash with the American people. Millions of Americans have had their health coverage canceled, even though the President repeatedly promised, if you like your health care plan, you can keep your health care plan. And oftentimes he punctuated that with, you can keep your health care plan, period. The President recently said he regrets that Americans find themselves in that situation. Well, Americans find themselves in that situation because of the health care law which he ran through Congress on a strictly partisan basis. They find themselves in that situation because they were told a very flat and emphatic statement by the President of the United States, the leader of the free world, and that emphatic, direct statement turned out not to be the case. Americans are uncertain of how they will afford significantly higher premiums. Employers are facing costly mandates. And now we learned at the end of last week that Moody's has downgraded the economic outlook for health insurers, citing the law's difficult implementation and the administration's numerous delays. So Moody's downgrades the outlook of these health insurers who are trying to make the law work. As the country's chief executive, the President should start a dialogue in his State of the Union speech tomorrow night that focuses on ways to empower Americans to create jobs and opportunities. This body is created by this body is controlled by the Democrats. The other body is controlled by the Republicans. We need bipartisan solutions to create jobs and opportunities. We've seen how a big government approach with more burdensome regulations and more bureaucratic intrusions, we've seen how that approach does not work. The State of the Union offers the President an opportunity to outline issues where he's willing to work with Republicans in a bipartisan way. We should be talking about market-driven strategies to reform health care. We should be talking about the Keystone XL pipeline and how to advance America's rich energy potential, the most abundant energy sources in the world, right here in America. Keystone XL pipeline would be a jobs win for the Obama administration. And yet the President cannot bring himself to come forward on this bipartisan idea. And of course, the best welfare program is a jobs program. The best unemployment program is one that creates jobs for Americans. Americans are ready to go to work. Rather than focus on the politics of jealousy and income inequality, the President should demonstrate leadership and cooperation. In a divided government, both leadership and cooperation are needed to bring about the enduring economic recovery that this country needs. So I look forward to the President's address tomorrow night and hope that we can hear bipartisan solutions to move us forward. Thank you, Mr. President. I see that my friend from Georgia here, and I yield the floor.
Mr. President.
Senator from Georgia.
Mr. President, I rise today to pay tribute to three gentlemen that, as a result of a vote taken by the Baseball Writers of America a couple of weeks ago, are going to be inducted into the Baseball Hall of Fame. These three men are former Atlanta Braves manager Bobby Cox and former Atlanta Braves pitchers Tom Glavine and Greg Maddux. Mr. President, these incredible athletes have left their imprint not only on Georgians, but on the entire baseball community around the world. These three gentlemen are among Major League Baseball's most accomplished coaches and players and will deservedly be inducted into the National Baseball Hall of Fame in July of this year. So far as I know, there have never been three inductees to the Hall of Fame from the individuals who spent most of their time with the same team inducted into the Hall of Fame in the same year. Truly remarkable. First, let me mention and honor Bobby Cox, a baseball legend and one of Major League Baseball's winningest managers. With a record of 2,504 wins, he ranks fourth on baseball's all-time managers win list. Bobby Cox started his career with the Braves in 1978. He left briefly in 1982 to manage the Toronto Blue Jays, only to return to the Braves in 1985, where he would spend the remainder of his career until his retirement following the 2010 season. In 1995, he led the Braves to the World Series championship, where they faced the Cleveland Indians. The Braves won the series in Game 6 in Atlanta, clinching the team's third championship in franchise history. Aside from Bobby's remarkable 556% winning percentage, he is also remembered for his all-time record for ejections in Major League Baseball with 158. And for those of us who know Bobby well and know that he is one of the nicest people you'll ever meet, and he's a big teddy bear, it's fair to say that if Bobby did not agree with the call on the field, he was quick to express his dissatisfaction and his disgust with it. And nobody would protect their players as a manager better than Bobby Cox. And it was no surprise when he would sometimes find himself watching the game ultimately from the locker room. No one can question Bobby's sheer passion and love for the game of baseball. And both the city of Atlanta and the state of Georgia are in his debt. I'd also like to acknowledge the impressive careers of Tom Glavine and Greg Maddux and highlight a few of their accomplishments. As Braves, Maddux and Glavine combined for over 400 wins. They will be the first players in 40 years who spent the majority of their careers together to become Hall of Famers in the same year. The last to do so were New York Yankee players Mickey Mantle and Whitey Ford. The Braves drafted Tom Glavine in the second round in 1984. He was such a talented athlete that the very same year the Los Angeles Kings drafted him in the fourth round to play professional hockey. Luckily for the Braves and for baseball, he chose baseball. He went on to spend 17 of his 22 decorated seasons in Atlanta. The famous left-hander ended his distinguished professional career with 305 wins, 2,607 strikeouts, and 2 Cy Young Awards, which he received in 1991 and 1998, both as a Brave. And in the Braves' '95 World Series victory, Glavine was named the most valuable player. When the lefty pitcher grabbed the bat and stepped up to the plate, we saw something not often seen in today's game. He came out swinging, and he could hit. Glavine was the recipient of 4 Silver Slugger Awards, an award given to the best offensive player at each position each year. His teammate Greg Maddox was known as a right-handed control pitcher with precision and accuracy, not often missing his targets. He wouldn't beat you with a 100-mile-per-hour fastball, but he'd embarrass you with placement and movement rarely seen before or since. Maddox started his career in 1986 with the Chicago Cubs. Following his 7th season with the Cubs and with the Cy Young Award under his belt, the Braves signed Greg Maddox as a free agent in 1993 in what is widely described as one of baseball's best free agent deals. He went on to win 3 more consecutive Cy Young Awards in a Braves uniform. Greg Maddox ended his career with 335 wins, a 3.13 ERA, 3,371 strikeouts, an impressive 4 Cy Young Awards, and 18 gold gloves in 23 seasons. Together, these individuals led the Braves to 14 straight division championships, an unparalleled accomplishment in any sport. And I dare say, Mr. President, that record will never be broken. It comes as no surprise that the Braves have retired the numbers 6, 31, and 47 to celebrate and recognize the distinguished careers of these 3 men. And now I am pleased to join Georgians in congratulating Bobby Cox, Tom Glavine, and Greg Maddox on their tremendous accomplishment of being inducted into the National Baseball Hall of Fame. Mr. President, I yield the floor. And I suggest the absence of a quorum.
Clerk will call the roll.
Mr. Alexander.
We see a tweet there from Senator Whitehouse talking about a guest he's planning to invite to tomorrow night's State of the Union address. There are a number of stories out there about President Obama's speech tomorrow night. The Hill writing that survivors of the Boston Marathon bombing, a fire chief from an Oklahoma city devastated by a tornado, and the first NBA player to come out as openly gay will be among those seated with First Lady Michelle Obama tomorrow night. Guests for the First Lady will also include a 16-year-old who is the youngest intern at a semiconductor maker, Intel, and the 2013 Teacher of the Year in the District of Columbia public school system, that in the Hill. Some members of Congress also sending other tweets about their guests. Congressman Barra says he's honored to have a local veteran, Matthew Kakata, join him for the State of the Union tomorrow night. And Representative Roscom says he's pleased to be joined by Hoffman Estates advisor who lost her health insurance under the Affordable Care Act. Our coverage of the State of the Union begins at 8 Eastern tomorrow night with a speech at 9. And as always, we'll get your thoughts by phone, Facebook, and Twitter. That's on C-SPAN tonight, starting at 8 Eastern. Coming up in the Senate here, a procedural vote related to the National Flood Insurance Program is scheduled for 5:30 Eastern this afternoon. That bill would delay flood insurance rate increases for 4 years.
Mr. President.
The senator from Louisiana.
Thank you, Mr. President. I see my colleague from Iowa here, and I understand he's been scheduled to speak in just a few minutes for 20 minutes, but I'd like to ask unanimous consent to dispense with a quorum call and to speak for up to 5 minutes.
Without objection.
Thank you, Mr. President. At 5:30 today, the Senate is going to take a very important vote, very important to people in many states, not just the state of Louisiana, which I've had the honor and privilege of representing now for almost 18 years, but to states from one end of this country to the other, coastal states, interior states, on an issue that is very important to homeowners and business owners alike. The vote that we're going to take is to call to get on to debating a Menendez-Isaacson bill that will fix the many urgent problems that have presented themselves in a recently passed bill called Biggert Waters. Biggert Waters was a bill that had wonderful intentions, which was to strengthen the flood insurance program and to make it self-sustainable, a program that many, many people depend on. It's a public-private partnership that provides affordable flood insurance for the middle class. But the bill was built backwards and upside down. The bill had good intentions, but it's had very detrimental consequences. And so this bill that we're going to vote to go to debate on, the Menendez-Isaacson bill, is really a good faith attempt to correct some of the problems with Biggert waters and to lead us in a direction to a place where this country can have a public-private partnership for flood insurance that actually works for the taxpayer, for the millions and millions of people, 5 million plus, that are going to have flood insurance, whether they've had it in the past or not. There are new maps that are coming, and millions of people will be required by the law to have flood insurance if they have a mortgage on their home, and most people have mortgages. Most people are unable to pay cash for their homes. Some people are fortunate enough, but I'd say 95% have mortgages on their homes. So if you have a mortgage, you're going to be required to have flood. If you're required to have flood, you're going to either have Biggert waters, unless we can postpone it and get instead Menendez-Isaacson. I wanted to show many of our critics that are not supporting the reform effort that we have underway say that we're trying to protect mansions on the beach. So I just pulled some just random pictures from the website that I've set up, My Home, you know, my home, my future. And this is in St. Amant, Louisiana, Walker, Louisiana, Belle-Chasse, Chalmette, Pointe Coupee, Houma, Belle-Chasse, Mandeville. These are a variety of different communities and neighborhoods. Independence, Louisiana, New Orleans. There's no beach within miles of this home. There's no beach within miles of Independence. This is really fairly far inland. You can see now, this is Houma. There's water all around here, but this house is raised probably 13 to 17 feet, which is now the required elevation in many parts of Louisiana and the Gulf Coast. But except for this home, which is looks like a beautiful old mansion, none of these are mansions, and none of them are on a beach. Because what's happening all over America is that these flood maps are being put into place all over the country, not just on the coast of California or Louisiana or Mississippi, Alabama, Florida, but I call your attention particularly to inland states like Pennsylvania. We've gotten a lot of criticism from some of the representatives from Pennsylvania about what we're doing, and I wanted to put into the record some very interesting statistics about many of the states that are not coastal states like Pennsylvania. We just got some new material that I'm going to submit for the record, and I know I've just got 1 minute and I'm going to finish up here, that there are all of these dots represent flood maps. The purple are flood maps that are in effect. Green are proposed flood maps that will be introduced, and the gold are new flood maps that are possible. The state of Pennsylvania is number 1 in the number of new flood maps that will be proposed by a long shot. There will be 1,425 new maps in Pennsylvania alone. People that have never been in a flood zone, people that are soon going to be in a flood zone, and when they find out that their insurance is $10,000 or $5,000 a year or $20,000 a year, they're not going to be happy, let me assure you. Pennsylvania, number 1. Number 2 is New York. 625 new maps are going to be executed. In New Jersey, 435 new maps. In North Carolina, 565. And in Michigan, 550. So everyone thinks this is a Louisiana issue. I've been trying to say for a year and a half, yes, this affects my state. Yes, it affects Mississippi. Yes, it affects Georgia and Alabama. But the country needs to wake up. This issue will affect everyone in many places because of the new maps that are coming out, because of the new science, the new ability to measure elevations. There are going to be people that have never flooded and have never been in a flood zone, and they're going to be told they're now in a flood zone. We better have a program they can afford. So I'm going to end on this 30 seconds and just say I really thank the leadership of Senator Menendez and Senator Isaacson. They will both speak later this evening as we move to this vote. Let's have this debate. Let's come up with a new approach that works for the taxpayer, for the homeowners, and for the realtors, the bankers, and the stakeholder groups that have been so supportive, realtors, home builders, National Association of Counties, League of Cities, Bankers Association, community bankers, and independent assurance agents are all supporting our effort. And I yield the floor, and I thank my colleague for his courtesies.
Senator from Georgia.
Mr. President, can I be recognized for 1 minute, please?
Without objection.
Mr. President, I want to thank the senator from Iowa for letting me jump in front of him. I just wanted to commend the senator from Louisiana and confirm everything that she said. The vote tonight on the motion to proceed is important. This is an important debate, not just for coastal states, not just for the coastline, but for the entire United States, because the unintended consequence of Biggert Waters as it goes into place is less insurance coverage for less and less Americans and more damage in case of another terrible storm like Sandy or Katrina. So I commend this distinguished senator from Louisiana and the coalition she has worked with to bring this issue forward, and I do hope all our colleagues will vote for yes on the motion to proceed tonight. And I yield back.
Mr. President,
Senator from Iowa.
tomorrow night we have the State of the Union address, and news reports say that one of the things that the President will be talking about is income inequality. That brings me to something I should have spoken on a couple weeks ago, because January the 8th, 2014 marked the 50th anniversary of President Johnson's call for a war on poverty. This anniversary provides a time to reflect on and reevaluate its twin aims of poverty relief and economic opportunity. The goal of poverty relief is to ensure that even those who might find themselves in tough times have a sufficient assistance to meet their basic human needs while lifting themselves out of abject poverty. In other words, we've got to make sure that people have a roof over their heads and food on their table as minimums. The goal of economic opportunity is to ensure the lower rungs on the economic ladder are strong enough to support that climb out of poverty. Economic opportunity is another term for the American dream, that through hard work, as you know, you can improve, not just by your own lot in life, but that your children and your children will be better off. If you judge the war on poverty according to the first aim, a good case can be made that we have been very successful. Looking at the official poverty levels, that is based on income prior to many transfer payments. Little has changed since 1964. However, consumption based upon studies show that the poor are much better off today than they were decades ago. We have a study available from the National Bureau of Economic Research showing it looks at consumption and shows that rather than income, shows over a 26% decline in poverty since 1960. There's little doubt that programs from Social Security to food stamps, from Medicaid to heating assistance have helped increase the standard of living for those at or below the poverty level. However, economic growth and the general decline in the cost of technology has also been a great source of poverty reduction. While providing relief from poverty is an admirable goal, the American dream has also been about opportunity. As President Johnson said in his State of the Union address 50 years ago, the goal of the war on poverty, quote, is not only to relieve the symptoms of poverty, but to cure it and, above all, to prevent it, end of quote. It is this goal of the war on poverty that has largely fallen flat. As I referenced earlier, the official poverty level has changed little in the 50-year fight on poverty, despite spending trillions of dollars on anti-poverty measures. In 1964, around 19% lived in poverty. Today, according to the most recent census data, that number stands only slightly lower at 15%. We all know that America is a land of opportunity. In America, we have no caste system. Laws and social norms do not relegate any individual or any group of individuals to lower social status. It can be tough, but individuals can and do climb their way to the top. Sometimes this process can take generations, but it has always been a source of pride that the next generation is better off and has more opportunities than that generation that came just before. Indeed, there is considerable upward mobility in our economy. A 2007 Treasury study on income mobility found that between 1996 and the year 2005, around half of those taxpayers who found themselves in the bottom quintile in 1966 moved to a higher income group in 2005. And how about the very top of the income distribution that my colleagues are fixated on? Contrary to what some may claim, those at the top are not the same year after year. The Treasury study found of those taxpayers who were in the top 100th of 1% in 1996, only 25% remained in that group in 2005. While there is upward mobility in America, there's always room for improvement. And there certainly are those who feel trapped in a cycle of poverty. Unfortunately, too often programs meant to help the less fortunate can act as an anchor, preventing Americans from climbing up the ladder of success. I have no doubt that the vast majority of those living at or below the poverty lines are very hardworking people. Our programs do not act as an anchor because of the poor themselves, but too often programs meant to actually help turn out to punish success. Too often those who are seeking to escape generations of poverty feel as if the harder they work, the further behind they get. The landmark welfare reform legislation Congress passed in 1996 sought to lift the anchor off the backs of the poor. It sought to increase opportunity by incentivizing individuals to work. The welfare reform law was meant to reward personal responsibility and strong work ethic rather than punish these traits so essential to success. The landmark law established work requirements, requiring individuals to work when job ready and within 2 years after coming on assistance. To receive funding, states must require a minimum amount of work, and that participation must be in hours by families receiving assistance. This meets one of the Temporary Assistance for Needy Families Act, called TANF. That was one of its primary goals. Then, to end the dependence of needy parents on government benefits by promoting job preparation. In other words, if you're going to move up the economic ladder, you got to be in the world of work. If you're shunted off to the side of society, out of sight, out of mind, then there's no opportunity to move up. In the years that followed, those who argued dire consequences would result particularly for single mothers, these people were proven wrong. Following the enactment of welfare reform, there was a precipitous decline in welfare caseload and usage. At the same time, the single mother labor force participation rose and incomes rose. Unfortunately, President Obama has persistently implemented policies that erode these statutory regulations, thereby discouraging personal responsibility and a strong work ethic. Just July 12, 2012, the administration issued what's referred to as guidance to states about this TANF program. This guidance explained how states can now seek waivers of work requirements for welfare recipients for the first time since the TANF program was created in the 1996 Welfare Reform Law. The 1996 welfare reform helped families to enjoy the dignity of self-sufficiency. It reduced poverty instead of pushing families out of poverty. The President's policies trapped Americans in soul-crushing government dependency. While welfare reform made strides, too often those working hard to get a leg up feel as if they're only treading water. On November 2012, the Congressional Budget Office released a report looking at the effective marginal tax rates of low and moderate income workers. That is, how much extra tax or reduction in government benefits is imposed on an American worker when he or she earns an additional dollar of income. In other words, people are pretty sophisticated about looking how much they get in a government program, and if they go in the world of work, are they going to be penalized for it instead of being compensated for working instead of drawing help. According to CBO, in 2013, the average marginal effective tax rate faced by low to moderate income workers was 32%. Keep in mind that this is just the average. Many workers experience marginal effective rates far exceeding the top statutory rate of 39.6% paid by the highest income people in America. For an example, an economist with the Urban Institute calculated the marginal effective tax rate of a single parent with 2 children under various scenarios. Just one scenario: examine what would happen if a household income rose from $10,000 to $40,000. Perhaps a single mother was able to increase her skills and earning potential by taking classes at night at a local community college. If this single mother had been receiving all the benefits she was eligible for, she would face a marginal effective tax rate of 80% as a reward for trying to make a better life for her and her family. That's a far higher marginal tax rate than most on the left even propose for the much derided top 1%. It is difficult to blame an individual in this situation who becomes disgruntled and just gives up, not seeking employment. It is us here in the government who have tilted the scales against those low-income Americans trying to realize the American dream. In order to alleviate this disincentive, there must be a better coordination between benefits and how they are phased out. Instead of reducing this disincentive to work, in recent years we have actually made it worse. The premium tax credit and cost-sharing subsidies that were enacted as a part of the Affordable Care Act will increase marginal tax rates by an average of 12 percentage points. Moreover, according to an analysis by the Joint Committee on Taxation, when the premium tax credit is fully in effect, some workers could experience, quote, infinite marginal tax rates. Infinite marginal tax rates. End of quote. Some of you may wonder, what is an infinite marginal tax rate? To put this into more understandable language, this means some workers could actually face marginal effective rates exceeding 100%. For a worker in this situation, it means that if they decide to put in a few more hours of work or get a second job to earn extra cash, they could actually end up worse off financially. Of course, this is an absurd result that tells people, don't work hard. Don't try to advance your situation, because if you do, we're just going to take it all away from you. Harvard economist, professor, and former chief White House economist Greg McHugh recently opined on this result, saying, quote, "It is hard to believe that the law is so badly written as to have this feature," end of quote. Well, Professor, believe it or not, the President and the majority party did enact this law with this feature, and they did so with the full knowledge of the Joint Committee on Taxation Analysis, which I had made public. Often I hear my colleagues on the other side come to the floor to pound the table about income inequality, something we're going to hear the President talk about tomorrow night in his State of the Union, we're told. There are a number of studies that examine income inequality. There is great variation among these studies on how income inequality is measured and the degree to which it has actually increased over the years. However, all these studies do point to some degree of increasing inequality over the last several decades. That we have to admit. This has occurred during both Republican and Democratic administrations. It has also been occurring across most of the developed countries. It happens not just here in the United States, but other places as well. My colleagues on the other side of the aisle often cite income inequality to justify whatever Democratic policy agenda is up at that particular time. Whether it's taxing the rich, raising the minimum wage, or extending unemployment benefits, they cite income inequality to justify their aims. However, these policies either fail to address the root causes of inequality or are nothing more than a temporary Band-Aid. Income inequality is a symptom of a much larger structural problem, not the disease itself. Raising taxes might be successful by generating revenue to fund greater wealth transfer payments, but it does nothing to rectify what caused the inequality in the first place. Soak-the-rich policies do not create greater opportunity for low-income individuals. In fact, because of the negative effects on economic growth and capital formation, they can reduce opportunity not only for the poor, but for all Americans. Our country has historically been a land of opportunity. Whether such policies are well-intended or cynical political opportunism, they're not worth trading away our nation's legacy of opportunity. You do not have to take my word for the anti-growth effects of increasing taxes. Research by Christina Romer, President Obama's former chief economist, found that a tax increase of 1% of GDP reduces economic growth by as much as 3%. According to this study, tax increases have such a substantial effect on economic growth because of the, quote, powerful negative effect of tax increases on investment, end of quote. In effect, what those who pursue wealth-destroying redistributionist policies are really saying, to quote Margaret Thatcher, is that they, quote, would rather the poor were poorer, provided the rich were less rich, end of quote of Thatcher. That may reduce economic inequality, but at the expense of making us all worse off. Our goal must be to create wealth and to create opportunity for all Americans, I reject the notion that in order to improve the lot of one individual, someone else must be made worse off. The leadership of the majority has become fixated on redistributing the existing economic pie. I believe the better policy is to increase the size of that pie. When this occurs, no one is made better off at the expense of anyone else. This is best achieved through pro-growth policies aimed at growing the economic pie, not by taking from some and giving to others. Similarly, increasing the minimum wage or extending emergency unemployment benefits also fail to address long-term causes of inequality. These proposals are well-intended, and I myself have supported both under the right circumstances, but neither strike at the heart of income inequality. While there are many contributing factors, much of the research points to the widening wage gap between the skilled and the unskilled labor. If we are to address some income inequality, the primary focus must be on ensuring individuals have the skills necessary to compete in a 21st century economy. One way to accomplish this is through greater competition in education, through increased school choice. We should also further expand our efforts made in 1996 to incentivize individuals to work and ensure those who want to work can gain the skills that are necessary for a 21st century economy. So there are certain things we can do to help reduce poverty and promote opportunity. However, just throwing more and more money at existing programs is not the answer. According to a Congressional Research Service report, federal spending on low-income assistance programs as a percent of federal outlays has more than doubled since the 1970s. No amount of money, then, will change the tried-and-true formula for escaping poverty, namely, graduate high school, wait until marriage to have children, and find a job and keep it for at least a year, while even those that follow this formula can fall on tough times. Statistically, it is rare that they will find themselves poor for a sustained period of time. We should be sure that our laws and programs encourage rather than discourage these three keys to success. One place to start is to take a look at reducing and eliminating the marriage penalty that can arise in both our tax laws and benefit programs. The war on poverty will not be won as long as the value of marriage is diminished. You cannot disagree with these facts. Children in single-parent households will face more challenges and are more likely to be poor. Some economists say that children raised in single-parent homes are 4 times more likely to be living in poverty. According to census data 2012, just 6 3/10% of the families headed by married couples are poor. In contrast, 31% of those in single-parent households are poor. Today, more children are born out of wedlock. More marriages are dissolving. Families are not as strong as they could or should be. And we have a social problem that cannot be cured with more government spending. The war on poverty must be solved in part by encouraging and nurturing healthy families. Of course, there is no magic cure-all for poverty. In fact, that's the point. The notion that experts in Washington can wage a successful war on poverty with spending programs as a weapon was never realistic. We're dealing with real people, with real lives, trying to realize their dreams, not pieces on a chessboard that we can move around as we wish. Our goal should be to tear down the barriers to economic opportunity and just simply get out of the way. When we discover that well-intentioned programs designed to help the poor are actually trapping them, and trapping them in generational poverty, we need to have the courage to chart a new course. The American dream is not to be dependent upon others for bare substance, but to have the opportunity to get ahead through your own hard work and perseverance. All Americans deserve the self-respect that comes from earning your own success in life. Millions of immigrants have flocked to our shores because America offers greater economic opportunity than any other nation. We are at risk of losing part of what has made our society unique. We should seize the opportunity of this anniversary of the War on Poverty, now 50 years ago, to reevaluate our approach to ending poverty and get back to what has historically worked for generations of Americans, and that is simply to promote economic opportunity. I yield the floor.
President.
Senator from Mississippi.
Mr. President, my remarks to the Senate will deal with the Homeowners Flood Insurance Affordability Act.